Shortly after her deconversion to atheism, she did that. Tracie became a member of the Atheist Community of Austin, the ACA, and began volunteering as a co-host for the award-winning program, the Atheist Experience, in 2006. I have to admit, I've seen you on that show many times, and I'm sort of doing the thing right now. In case you haven't done it already, please, a big warm round of Manitoba applause for Tracie.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. So first of all, I will have to wear my glasses for this because reading is involved. But I want to thank the local association for inviting me today. It's the first time in Canada, so to be here to talk. I do want to say a few things first about the presentation. Number one, I did tailor this for an American audience, so the statistics that I'm going to be discussing are going to be geared toward the U.S., just kind of an FYI. I understand that it's American-centric, but it was a talk that was not tailored specifically for this talk. So that's number one. And number two is usually during this presentation I use extremely indecent language and I say a lot of things in not good faith. But today I think I better curb that. It's like I thought I should curb it when I heard the blasphemy talk. I was like, don't get arrested. But then I heard we want someone to get arrested, so maybe I'll just swear like a sailor, be really rude and horrible. I'm joking. It was funny that I was like, wow, am I going to get arrested after my talk?
Fuck you.
Yeah. Okay. Also, just to note that there is like a caveat involved with this talk. So there's a specific. Well, first of all, let me just say the way they have me set up, I'm going to have to remember to move these slides while I read off this screen, which isn't connected to those slides. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of coordinating. So I'm going to do my best to not mess that up. But also, the religious family values that I'm going to talk about today are not comprehensive. So this is a specific type of religious family value that I'm going to be addressing here that's geared more toward evangelical family values and also conservative family values. So it's not every religious family, and I understand that. The purpose of the talk is not to say that all religious families are going to work this way. Religion is a tool, like many things are tools, that can be used by different people in different ways. You can use religious tools and religious, metrics and religious parts of religion to do good things. So there are plenty of churches that are involved in social justice, that are involved in positive movements, that use their ability to activate community in order to promote community welfare. And they are often less concerned about ideology. Sometimes when you talk to them about traditional Christian ideology, the members aren't even aware of it. They'll say, well, I've never even heard that. And it's like, well, this is all of Western literature relies on these Christian traditions that you're saying you're not even familiar with. You're basically just going to church because you want to promote the food pantry and you want to help with the homeless outreach. And you're doing it because it's the place where you go in order to be part of a community that does good community works and outreach. Churches have that reputation. I also want to note that one of the responses to my talk was that this is a bit of preaching to the choir. There's a stat that I give at the beginning of the presentation that has to do with the way that secular people view religion, that in my opinion is a demonstration that this is not about preaching to the choir. It may be that in this room, most of the people will relate to what I'm about to talk about, but it's true that religion has a lot of respect from people at large, even within the secular community. And I don't mean what I just spoke about, the idea of religion does good things sometimes and that's what people respect. I'm saying that just the mere fact that a person says, I'm religious or I go to church, will instantly give them respect, no matter what else someone knows about them. Just that alone is sufficient for people to say, I admire that about you. And it doesn't seem to matter where you're going to church. I mean, Westboro Baptist Church is a church, but I don't admire the fact that they're very religious and attending church. So let's go ahead then and take a look at this. and see where we go. So, is religion good for families? Great, this is working. So Americans, at least, I'm thinking potentially Canadians as well, see value in church attendance. 2/3 of Americans think that attendance is admirable, and nearly 9 in 10 call it acceptable. Only 11% consider church useless. And I was kind of disappointed. I've got the link below of where you can look up more information on this particular survey, but I wish that they had one that said is attendance detrimental, because I would be in that small category of people that says, I think that this can actually be a negative. Even non-religious people have favorable opinions. 80% believe church attendance is acceptable, and 43%, this is non-religious, these are people that aren't themselves going to church, who are saying that they label it admirable that you attend church. 29% call it useless. So let's have a little show of hands survey. How many people in this room feel like they have a reason to wake up and do things in the morning? Most of you. Some of you don't, and I'm sorry for that. And there really are people that sometimes that don't, and I am sorry for that. I know that people struggle with things like depression, and it can strip you of will and meaning. But I think for most of us, we feel like we do have a purpose for living. And how many people in here believe that there's a purpose to family, that there's a reason why when you're engaged in a family or starting a family? I like to think that if you're faced and confronted with the idea of having a child, like if even if it's not planned, that you have some time to think about what that's going to mean. What are the implications here of starting this family? Why would I do this? Do I want to do this? Do I want to proceed with this? Is this something that I even want to begin? And these are questions that I would think you would ask yourself again, even if you were surprised by the fact that you were about to, have to consider whether or not you were going to bring a gestation forward. And this is before somebody even might be family planning and saying, do we want to even try for a child? But if you're going to start something like a family, I would hope that you would put a little bit of thought into what you were doing and why you were doing it, and not just say, whatever happens, happens. But I guess that occurs too. Well, if you believe that you have a purpose for your life, and if you believe there is a purpose for family, and if you're in this room today and you do not have a religion, then Focus on the Family is here to tell you that you are wrong. Now, it's interesting because for those of you who do feel like you have a purpose in life, I'm going to assume that you don't believe that that's a purpose that necessarily everyone else in this room has. So what drives me to get out of bed in the morning is probably not what drives you. We might have some things in common, we might not. But it's the Atheist Community of Austin has a mission statement. We publish it online, so we've got our mission. And if people agree with that mission, if they say, yes, I think that's a worthy purpose, they can join the association and they can help us in those causes, like separation of church and state, promoting positive atheism, things like that. What we don't do is say everybody's purpose is to support the separation of church and state and to promote positive atheism. We don't assume that everybody's on board with that or that they need to be. And in this case, Focus on the Family, they're not just telling you what your purpose can be if you join their religion, which they're predominantly promoting a conservative Christian view. They're telling you that whether you know it or not, whether you agree with it or not, whether you believe it or not, they know the purpose of your life. Focus on the Family defines themselves as a global Christian ministry dedicated to helping families thrive. We provide help and resources for couples to build healthy marriages that reflect God's design and for parents to raise their children according to morals and values grounded in biblical principles. So they are openly promoting a religious message, and I'll give them that. They're very honest about what they're doing, at least their perspective. They're not always honest in how they go about it. But ultimately, they believe that the purpose of life, this is your life they're talking about, is to know and glorify God through an authentic relationship with His Son, Jesus Christ. Now, they're saying this not just to you, they're saying this to Muslims, they're saying this to Buddhists, they're saying this to, you name it, that's who they're talking to, Hindus, everybody. This is what you should be focused on. This purpose is lived out first within our own families and then extended in love to an increasingly broken world that desperately needs Him. And this is a theme that we're going to see again and again. In a healthy family, you use particular things to bring the family together and to increase family bonds. So if you have a couple of children, Jim may be taking piano lessons, Jenny may be into soccer, and when Jenny has a soccer game, the family goes and they watch her soccer game and they cheer on Jenny and they tell her good job, and it doesn't matter if you win or lose, you just go out there and you play and you support your team, and the family's gonna be there and we're gonna watch Jenny's game. And it doesn't matter if Jimmy says, I hate soccer, it's like you're still coming because this is your sister and this is your sister's soccer game and this is important to us as a family to support you gotta learn to support your sister and what is important to her. And then next month at your recital, Jenny, who can't stand to listen to you practice, is gonna be there and she's gonna be listening to your recital, and when you're done, she's gonna tell you, good job, Jim, for that piano piece that you played. You did a really good job, because that's what families do. So you use the piano interest, you use the soccer interest in order to create bonds for the family and to teach the children and other people in the family about what it means to be supportive of the other members of the family and to bond. What happens with these religions is what you're seeing here. In this situation, instead of having a family that says, we're Christians and we go to church and the kids go to Sunday school and they give them cookies and they learn about Bible stories and it's all nice. Then we sing songs and then we talk about the food pantry. And then if Jenny or Jimmy comes to mom and dad one day and says, I'm gonna be a Buddhist, mom and dad say, well, that's a surprise, but okay. We still love you and we're still gonna support you, what can we do? That is what it means to be a family that uses religion as a tool to support the family. And that happens. Some people feel uncomfortable going to their families and they'll write us a letter and say, I was scared to talk to my parents. I went and talked to my parents and guess what? They were very cool. We get that letter. That's a family using religion like you would use anything else to increase the family bond, and if somebody's not on board with it, they're okay with it because the family is the priority there. But according to, ironically, Focus on the Family, that is not the priority. The priority is promoting the religion, and what they have done is turn the family into a tool to execute a plan to promote the religious values throughout the community. So your family becomes this thing that religion is going to use to further its own goals. And you can see what happens when a person steps up and says, I'm not on board with that. Well, you have to be on board with it because that's the whole purpose to this family. So if you're not on board with that, you're not on board with the family. It's almost like what Eric was talking about. If you're not on board with this, then you're anti-Canadian. You're anti-American because you're not Christian. Well, with these people, you're anti-family. You're not with our family because you're not on board with this religion. And that is not okay. That is a perversion of the family, and that is when a family has been converted into something that it should not be, to be used as a tool by something else. The family is no longer the priority, and this is a problem. So let's see if you guys can get it right this time. How many of you think you have some concept of what constitutes a value? Okay, so some of you have values, a few of you don't. And you may be sitting very alone. And how many of you have some concept when you're confronted with like a moral dilemma in your life of how to sit down and think about it and where you would derive the values that you would use in order to address problems or concerns within your own life? Okay, so you feel like you're equipped to deal with, that you have sufficient values to make moral decisions and deal with situations like that. Well, once again, you're wrong. And this comes from a book, and it's a children's book. Someone pointed out to me that number 5 was interesting, protect your child's mind. But on top of it, they have the values tree, right? So they're teaching children how to think about values. And in this book, the very first value that's not really a value, but the very first things, they've got explaining the values tree, and then they have values begin with God. And think about the implications of that as a person who doesn't believe a God exists, right? We hear all the time, where do you get your morality? Where do you get your morality? If you're an atheist, where do you get your morality? Well, this is a children's book. Values begin with God. And when you look at part 2, what does it start with? Faith in God, Let's start with faith in God. And what's really scary is, I showed this one time, and someone's response to it, they told me, they said, if you're, and I don't suggest that people should want to do this, but if you're going to poison a dog, you don't just hand it a cube of rat poison. You wrap it in bacon. And what you're looking at here, I mean, when you're thinking about values you'd want to teach your children, well, who wouldn't want to teach their kid number 11, respect? I mean, that's a good value. Number 12, responsibility. Well, of course, that's going to be useful in your life. Self-control, moderation, honesty and integrity, kindness, compassion. I mean, look at this list. This is a wonderful list of values. And thrown in there is faith in God, and values begin with God. And so for a child, when mom and dad are reading you this book, or you're hearing this in Sunday school, you've got these adults that are telling you these things that make perfect sense. They can explain very well to you why respect is important, why responsibility is important, why self-control and moderate, why honesty and integrity, all of that, compassion, kindness. Oh, and by the way, faith in God, let's just get that in there, and then we'll just keep going with peace and humility, loyalty, commitment. And for the child, they're not going to stop and question the one thing and say, well, wait a minute, we kind of glossed over this one, you know, and maybe they're not glossing. I mean, sure, they're getting like Jesus stories, and these are children that are often very small. So this is impressionable to these children, and they are going to associate faith in God with all of these other things that most people consider honorable attributes for a human being to have. So it's important to understand how this gets thrown in there. And this is why you meet people that are 30 years old saying, where do you get your morality? I don't understand. How can you have morality and know God? Because this has been drilled into their heads. These are fundamentalists that are asking this question 9 times out of 10. So I thought, well, let's look and see what someone else has to say about this if we have like different perspectives, but I found out that we don't. Conservative Islam is very similar. It's strikingly similar to what we see on the Focus on the Family page. Says here, this is under, Mission Islam is a site that has a lot of Islamic information. It's actually an interesting site. I don't think it's like a bad site. If you want to go learn about Islam and Islamic perspectives, it's probably a decent site. It has a ton of information. This was on the Establishing an Islamic Family section. Most importantly, a home is an important means toward building the Muslim community. I think that's important too. I mean, I agree with them. Homes and families are the foundation of the communities. So it's important to have healthy family structures if you're going to have a healthy community. You can't have dysfunctional families holding up a functional community. So it is important here, and they've got it down. Yeah, it's important to have these families and the home be a very functional structure. The society is made up from home and its origin. The home is life, and life is society. If the home is strong, then the community will be strong in implementing the laws of Allah. Now that's the important part. This is the purpose again. You're looking at why. Why does the family need to be strong? Because then it'll make a strong community so that we can implement the laws of Allah. That's the whole point. That's why we're doing everything we're doing. What is required is callers. And when they say callers, they mean people called, not necessarily like someone on the phone. So what is required is callers who are guides, students of knowledge, a righteous wife, mothers who can educate, to be born out of our Muslim homes and then go into society in order to reform it. And I think we understand what they mean by reform it. Righteous husband and wife share the primary and most important step toward building a righteous Islamic home. Educating the children should be done from an early age, starting with Quranic memorization, supplication, etiquette, and manners. Your family is for God. Your family is for promoting God. Your family exists to promote God. This is how these people think. This is their own words. Okay, you get another shot. Lucky you, because you guys are dismal with these answers. Okay. How many people in here were, and this will be an interesting, how many people in here were raised by secular parents, even if you had one secular parent? Okay, that's not bad, actually, considering I was told that I was coming to like the Bible Belt of Canada, and they were saying it's about how wide it was, or somebody said something about where they come from is like the Bible buckle or something, and I said, well, if that's the way it's done, then Texas is the Bible corset. So, how many people in here are secular parents? How many of you have kids and are secular? Okay, that's good. Do you think that a secular parent has anything to offer? And this is a trick question, I'm going to warn you, this is tricky. Do you believe that a secular parent has anything to offer in terms of family values? Raise your hand if so. God, you people are gullible. No, you don't. You have nothing. And I don't know why you think you do. So the Grace Valley Christian Center is here to let you know how wrong you are. In this one, I kept it all in. I'm going to read this whole slide because this is priceless in a scary way. Since the fall of Adam and Eve, all people are born twisted and practice sin moment by moment. Under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, David wrote of man's real condition, saying, "Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me," but don't abort. "And even from birth, the wicked go astray. From the womb, they are wayward and speak lies," which is a trick, right? I mean, I don't know how you speak lies from the womb, but all things are possible with God. If a Christian father refuses to study the Word of God, listen up, dads, daily and diligently, he will have nothing to offer his family in terms of family values. So even if you're a Christian father and you're only studying the Word of God every other day, or maybe you study daily but not really that diligently, you've got nothing. So as a secular father, what have you got, right? You're like in the negative range. You've got less than nothing. You're probably doing more harm than good. He will instead subscribe and teach the, gasp, secular orthodoxies prevalent in the world. And I'm going to propose that the secular orthodoxies are superior because we don't hold up anything above the families. We wouldn't turn on our families like a rabid dog just because they say, "Mom, Dad, I don't really agree with this particular belief." Eli, who's an Old Testament figure, had another problem. This is his problem. This is the problem, right? And this is why a secular family value is better. Eli had another problem resulting from his neglect of the Bible. The Bible says one should worship God alone, but in 1 Samuel 2:29, God asks, "Why do you honor your sons more than me?" Eli's problem was that he loved his children more than religion. Goes into a little bit of a discussion about what does that Hebrew word mean. But in the end, God is the glorious, heavy, all-worthy one. Think about his perfections and attributes, his infinity, wisdom, transcendence, omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence, holiness, justice, and goodness. He alone is the heavy one whom we should honor, right? And remember when first time I read this, and my thought was, if I was infinite, and I was wise, transcendent, omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, holy, just, and good, I would probably say, I got it all, I'm set, you don't need to spend time worshiping me, like just go take care of your family, right? Because I got everything, right? I'm just like loaded with omnis. And I don't really need the worship. It doesn't really add anything to my enjoyment of running the entire universe. But yeah, you have nothing. This is what they're teaching people, right? They're teaching people this en masse, openly. And this is not considered to be dehumanized. If you tell them their religion is dehumanizing, they look shocked. Well, no, God loves you. God loves your wicked self, your unworthy, sinful, reprobate, depraved self. What's dehumanizing about that? If you weren't worth anything, God wouldn't love you. It's completely confusing. I would use stronger language, but I don't want to be arrested. So is religion good for families? Now we're looking again, the specific type of religion. Is this type of religion good for families? And I'm not following along, am I? The following testimonials demonstrate what happens when members of a family no longer subscribe to the religion. Religion serves families as long as the family members serve the religion. The goal seems to be less about and this was an interesting sub-point. Sometimes when you're looking into something, you see themes. The goal seems to be less about keeping all the members as believers and more about pressuring them to keep pretending they believe whether they do or not. This is a weird theme. I don't think they do this consciously, but this is what I noticed. Let's say that you had some reason to believe that some child in your household, that one of your kids, might be like heading towards suicide. You think that your child is getting depressed, you're starting to become concerned, you think they may be becoming self-destructive. If that was your concern, and you cared about the child, and you didn't want them to hurt themselves, What on earth would make you tell that child? Like, why would you walk around your house saying, you know, if any kid of mine was ever suicidal, I would throw them right out of this house, right? I wouldn't. I would never. These people that are suicidal, they're evil. I don't want to have anything to do with them. I'm not going to have anything like that in this house. Why would you say things that would purposely intimidate your child to not come to you if you really valued their life and thought they were going to hurt themselves? You would do everything you could to you would be trying to get to the child to talk to them about it, right? You would want them to talk to you. You would want them to come. You don't want to come home one day and find your child injured or dead. But in these households, the parents will say that the penalty for non-belief is hell, but then they raise a household and create an environment where nobody feels safe coming out to say, I don't believe. If I really believed my kid was going to hell, and if I really didn't want that, you'd think I would want them to come to me first. I would want them to talk to me about it. I'd want to have a situation where they could openly come and we could speak so that I could try to save them. But that is not what happens. These people, what you're going to see here is just an endless list of testimonials of people who say, I'm afraid to talk to my family because I think they're going to have nothing more to do with me. So when these people, there's a disconnect here. Almost like what Greta was talking about, you know, you believe in this afterlife, it's all wonderful. Your child has died and gone to heaven where it's, you know, candies and rainbows and ponies and Jesus, and yet you're crying and horrified and grief-stricken. Why? Because there's a disconnect. Do you really believe what you say you believe here? Because something's not right. And something's not right here when somebody says that my child's going to suffer an eternity in hell if they don't believe, and then runs around saying it's more important to me that you not tell me that you don't believe than it is that you come and talk to me so that we can try and work this out and I can try and help you. I don't believe, there's something going on. They don't believe what they're saying they believe. On some level, something's not adding up. But when families use religion as a primary or sole means of cohesion, they sometimes have a hard time adhering to members who can't share their beliefs, and that's an understatement. So these are the testimonials. You're going to see a lot of, like this one's labeled fear of rejection. But you're going to see fear of rejection in almost all these letters. But I still pulled them because there's other things that you're going to see as well. So it's not like the other ones aren't going to be a fear of rejection, but they will have other aspects that I want to stress. So on this one, these are actual letters. I've cleaned them up grammatically a little bit, and I have edited them for brevity. But in essence, these are real letters that I pulled out and just sort of cut down to try to make these slides. My last question has to do with telling my family I'm an atheist. Everybody in my family knows I'm an atheist except for my dad and grandmother. The reason I haven't told my grandma is because she's 75 and I'm afraid it would cause her to have a stroke or something and she would die. And I'm afraid if I told my dad, he would disown me. Should I tell them or just pretend to believe that stuff when I'm around them? They're both Jehovah's Witnesses, by the way. Anybody in here Jehovah's Witness background? Nobody. Wow, okay, that's rare. I've never seen an audience with nobody. Generally what happens is I'll get a few hands raised, I'll call on them, and I will say, is this person kidding about being disowned? And the response is always no. Jehovah's Witnesses will cut you off in a way that you have never seen, probably only dwarfed by the Amish. They will cut you off. If you need something like to save your life, they will go and help you. But they are not going to come to your house for dinner. They are not going to have anything more to do with you when you have been part of the church and you stop being part of the church. You are cut off, like hard and fast. So this guy has a legitimate fear. And this is the dishonesty breeding that I was talking about, the idea that you're trying to force your family members to lie because it's more important to you that they pretend to toe the line than that they actually do. I am a closet atheist. I sense this animosity every time I try to even question my dad's assumptions and ones from my family as a whole. It sickens me to think that if they knew I didn't believe, they literally would think I would go to hell. I don't want them to think bad things about me. I plan to never tell them I'm an atheist, although my brother already suspects it. The one time I told my dad I was an atheist, it was a disaster. I just gave up on the whole idea of being honest and started telling him I believe. That's what I do now. What should I do? How can I find peace in all of this? We probably get more letters from children in families than anybody else. And I think part of the reason for that is that children are in an especially difficult situation. Children, just as a biological reality, are geared toward wanting their parents' approval, their parents' love, and their parents' acceptance. you are, from the day they start to have any kind of cognitive capacity, the thing that takes care of them as a parent or as a caregiver. You're the one that takes care of every single need they have. The thought of losing that is terrifying to a small child. And even as the child gets older and they recognize that they're not going to die if mom and dad die, they still have this fear of loss and disconnect from the parents. And there are people that are well into adulthood who have issues with the idea of strained relationships with their parents. It's very hard to get over that. When you have something like a spouse, you have that life before, right? There's like that life before you met and married your spouse or met and partnered with your partner. You have that knowledge that you get along without the person. And so that even the pain of loss of a spouse or somebody that you've partnered with, still you understand, I have the capacity to live without this. But for children, this takes a long time to cultivate and to understand. And so for them, they want to be accepted badly by their parents. And what happens in these situations is that the children feel forced to lie. So in their heads, what's happening is, mom and dad are accepting of me, but it's not me. Because I have to pretend that I believe these things or they'll reject me. So they don't really accept me. And so this is why these kids feel strongly compelled to come out. They want to come out, and they want what they're really hoping is that they're going to be honest with mom and dad, and that mom and dad are going to say, we love you anyway. But they're afraid, because what they're afraid is really going to happen is that they're going to come out and mom and dad are going to say, we don't love you anymore. This is what frightens them to death. If they come out, they feel like they're going to get rejected. If they don't come out, they feel like the real them is not loved. These are children who feel like there is no way for them to get their parents' approval. There's no way for them to get their parents' acceptance. There's no way for them to get their parents' love. It is completely, flatly denied to them unless they really do believe. And that's a huge pressure, but it's not enough pressure to make somebody believe something, because belief isn't formed based on coercion. So these kids inside will always know that they're not acceptable. This is a two-parter. Okay, now, yeah, this is, okay. I come from an Orthodox Sikh family. Is anybody in here familiar with Sikhism? Okay, Sikhism is one of those religions that has the kinder, gentler religious reputation. What I find is sometimes when you have these religions that have these great reputations, you look deeper and they're not so great. Sikhism became big on the internet when someone published a very mean photograph of a woman with excessive facial hair. And they were kind of making fun of her, and she found out about this, and she responded by giving like a treatise on Sikhism, where she said, look, my religion teaches that people are what they are, and they need to be accepted as who they are, what they look like, how they are, that we are all, formed perfect, and so we don't do things like, if I have facial hair, I don't get rid of it, and the males in my religion don't shave at all either, and it's just a thing that we don't do because we find ourselves acceptable. We accept ourselves, and we love ourselves as we are. And you think, wow, that's awesome, and in fact, it was awesome. The response to the meme and to her response were overwhelmingly in support of her, which makes sense. It's like, what a great message. Love yourself no matter what. Don't feel like you have to conform to pressure to change yourself to be better for other people. That's great. Would that we all have that kind of self-esteem. But there's another side to this thing. He comes from an Orthodox Sikh family. He can't cut his hair or shave. What happens when the kid doesn't want to have the facial hair? What happens when the kid says, I want to shave? What happens then? My parents understand I'm a non-believer. I feel very embarrassed when someone sees me in a turban and asks about my religion. I want to cut my hair, but how do I break it to my parents? They're very religious, and I can't imagine their reaction. I love them. They don't force me to be religious, but I don't think they'd like me to cut my hair. Now, I got to say, when I read this, I was confused by it, because I was thinking to myself, parents freak out when you tell them they don't believe. How is it more of a problem that you don't engage in this particular they're accepting that you don't believe, but you're worried that if you cut your hair, that's going to be a problem. Like, that doesn't even make sense to me. No one in my family has ever done such a thing. I fear I will be an outcast and scorned by everyone. My hair is unmanageable. I waste a lot of time combing and washing it, tying a turban. I have a lot of hygiene problems with it. I don't want to keep it, but I love my parents. What do I do? And I just want to note that Guy here, and I've changed these names slightly, Guy here spent about 3 pages describing how much he hates his hair. Really, really has problems with it. Dandruff issues, problems, he can't stand it and he just wants to get rid of it. He doesn't like it from a social perspective, he doesn't like it from a hygienic perspective, he just hates it. But I told Guy what I basically just told you. Mom and Dad are cool with you not believing, they sound like cool people. Why don't you just go tell them what you've told me, what a strain this is on you, what a stress this is for you, and that this is really, really bothering you, and you just want to cut it, and you don't believe in I don't think that once they understand how stressful this is on you, that they're going to have much of a problem. So Guy did that. He followed my advice, and he wrote me back to tell me what a fail it was. He says, I tried convincing them with what you said. Unfortunately, it didn't work. My mom said I should consider her and Dad dead if I ever cut my hair. Right? This is the Sikhs. I live in Australia and they're in India. She said she'd not want to see me ever again if I did anything of that sort. My mom said after she and Dad die, I can do whatever the hell I want to do. I guess I'll have to be what I am, happy or not. Thank you. Anyway, Guy. Now, I don't really know how to interpret what Guy finally told me, but I got the impression that what he was saying was that he would stick with Mom and Dad's requirements, whether he was happy or not. I don't think he's going to rebel. But it transcends Christianity. And even the more softer sounding Eastern religions, it's not pretty. Here's some real destruction. I'm an atheist. Ooh, not skipping around, am I? Gotta remember. I'm an atheist married to a conservative religious Baptist. I once was religious myself, and that's very common. People get married when they're both religious, everything is good, then one of them changes their view, and that's the end of everything. I once was religious myself. We have several children together. She's emphatic she's emphatic they attend church every week. Skip around a little bit here. My children know I don't believe in God. I have some conversations with my older two sons, 10 and 8. The 8-year-old is like talking to a brick wall. He will flat out tell me the Bible's right, God wrote it, so it's correct. The 10-year-old will talk more openly. The last 2 times I've talked to my 10-year-old, he's gotten upset and started to cry. This last time I pressed him to understand why he was crying. I found out he believes I'm going to hell and is upset by this. My 8-year-old, this is really interesting, the 8-year-old is frightening. My 8-year-old has also told me I'm going to hell, but is unemotional about it. Right? Too bad for you, Dad. It's gonna suck, but whatever. To me, this is unacceptable. My children should not be taught this. I'm not sure where they've gotten this, if someone has told them or if they've figured it out from the teachings at church. So he doesn't really understand whether they've put it together in his head that, the way that the teachings are that Dad's going to hell, or if somebody's outright told them Dad's going to hell. But this is also common, where people say my children are freaking out because they think I'm going to go to hell. And for a child who believes this is very bad, right? This is very stressful, and I can understand why he has this issue. It's apparent someone's coaching the 10-year-old in his responses. I'm not sure if it's my wife or someone else, like a pastor or Sunday school teacher. I also know they pray for me at church. I'm considering telling my wife I don't want them praying for me anymore in their church and to remove me from any prayer lists I'm on. I feel this will help, as my kids will not hear them praying for me every week. I think that's a great idea. I don't think the kids who are already upset about this need to keep hearing that we need to pray for Dad's salvation to save him from hell. I think that's counterproductive to a situation where the children are already freaking out, or at least the non-sociopathic child is already freaking out. I hate to suggest divorce, but this is where we're heading. And this is common too, and we don't know what to tell people. Luckily, there's a group now, Recovering from Religion, where you can call them up and they will help you out with this, with people who have really been counseled on how to help you. We are not counselors. I am not a family therapist. I am not equipped to tell people what to do in these situations, and half the time I'm telling them, go to a counselor. If your spouse isn't speaking to you, if this isn't working, if the communication is being shut down, you have to get intervention. And if they won't go to intervention, there's nothing left. I don't know what to tell you. But this is a family therapy situation if I ever saw one. I think most people should consider family therapy even before it gets to divorce. I think that's part of an issue. Just FYI, I'm a huge advocate of therapy. Let's see. We don't get tons of letters about physical abuse, so please don't think that this is common. This is probably one of the rarer things, but we do get it, and we do get it in regard to Christianity as well. I still hide my true identity as an atheist because I'm Middle Eastern from Saudi Arabia. My family is very Islamic. My father used to hit me and abuse me in my childhood to pray and worship Allah. He used to tell me that I did not pray enough to Allah and Allah will punish me, make me suffer in this life and the afterlife. My father wanted me to be an Islamic cleric because I used to read a lot of books, but I disagreed. I wanted to become an engineer. I'm a sophomore, so this is my current major degree. Good for Omar. I'm glad that he's doing what he wants. But I mean, this is horrendous. Threats and manipulation, always a fun family bonding exercise. Over the years, I've deconverted into atheism. Recently, my wife saw me watching your show and said, if you become an atheist, I'm going to leave you. I don't know how to make her understand what an atheist truly is because she doesn't ever want to discuss religious topics with me, right? Shut it down, shut it down. I don't want to know. If you're going to go to hell quietly. Don't make me have to think about it. Is there anything I can say to make her understand I'm not bad or evil? We have a 4-year-old son, always complicates the situation, who told me this morning that mommy said God was everywhere. I'm concerned. I don't want my children indoctrinated into believing something for which there is no proof, but I have to be careful what I say to my son about God because my wife will lose it and leave me. How can someone intelligent and caring like my wife love a man, Jesus, she's never met, yet be willing to divorce the man who's been here for her through thick and thin for 12 years? And I think that's a great question that Carl deserves an answer to. I'm not sure he's going to get that answer, but I think he deserves it. Rejection and disrespect. You know, this is starting to sound like a broken record, isn't it? Rejection and disrespect, why not? I would love to like your page, but I really can't let other friends and family see me do that. I've recently come out to family and most friends, but they're still simmering over it. I was tagged on Facebook in a photo taken of me at a PastaCon. After I was tagged, things got extremely ugly. My father has still not spoken to me. My in-laws originally told my husband to divorce me. They've come around since. Anyway, emotions are high and everyone hates me now. What do you even say? I was tagged in a photo at a PastaCon. The world crumbled around me. This is ridiculous. And yet it's reality for this woman. Stress on children, more of that. My son thinks I'm going to hell. We'll just hit that bottom line. I mean, that's just, that times 100 in our email box. Manipulation. This was an interesting one. I'm going to summarize this because they're telling me my time's getting short. So let me just summarize. This person was in a particularly interesting situation. He was from a Hispanic family. They are extremely religious in some situations. And his mother is very superstitious, and she has an older kind of matriarchal sister who is like the matriarchal aunt of the family. She sort of runs the family. And the older sister does not like this older son, or I'm sorry, is this the, shoot, am I on the right? Yeah, okay, it does not like the older son. I got the wrong thing here up in front of me. Okay, and they go head to head. The older aunt, I believe, in a very manipulative bid, went to her sister and told her sister, I had a dream where I was told that all of your children were going to end up together in the afterlife. This is evil and brilliant. His mother now begins to flip out because if he's going to hell, he's going to drag his siblings with him. The younger siblings are going to end up in hell because the aunt had a dream. So it becomes super important now that he comes back to the fold, right? He can't stay out. So he's like, now I'm getting this uber pressure from mom because and so I basically advised him to just say, if God has already foreseen and told the aunt that you're all going to end up in the afterlife together, then this is a done deal. Whether you come back or whether they end up in hell is already established per her dream. So mom can relax because there's no way to change it, right? This is the future. Now, I don't know if his mother's going to buy it, but it worked for Matt's family. When he told them, don't worry about it, it's in God's hands, that seemed to make them relax a bit. So hopefully it worked for him. I didn't hear back, so I don't know. And we often don't hear back, so we send this advice out. We don't know what happens. teen atheist. My father's a minister of a Seventh-day Adventist church, and I fear that my status as an atheist might damage his career, and that can happen. I mean, some churches you have to qualify to be a minister or an elder, and it can mess with that when you have a child that doesn't believe. My mother looks to me as her only child that takes an interest in Jesus, except I don't. I just go to make her happy. I don't know how long I can keep up the charade. What do I do? In this instance, I think the mother is probably sincere. I think that she is not trying to intimidate this child. I think that the reason mom tells her, you're my only child that still believes, is because mom's probably glad that she has one child that still believes. I don't think she's trying to put pressure on the kid, but unwittingly, I think that's what's happening. Fear of rejection. My newfound skepticism is wreaking havoc on me psychologically. I'm married with kids. I can't come out publicly with my skeptical attitude without destroying my family. This is an Orthodox Jew. And we sometimes get letters from people in Orthodox communities where they're very strict, and where coming out doesn't just mean losing your family, but it means being exiled from your entire social structure. And that can be extremely horrendous, and there needs to be support for that, but right now there's, as far as I'm aware, not. So this is a rough situation until these people have somewhere to go. Or even if you have somewhere to go, do you really want to leave your entire world behind? I mean, this is tough. I keep not keeping up now because I'm rushing. Okay, rejection and disrespect. My mother and 2 siblings disowned me, right? They're Jehovah's Witness. When the topic of religion came up toward my children, my mother felt the need to say, well, I'll be the one to teach them about God. I told her this is not going to happen, and she replied, good luck having children with no morals. And this is, you hear about people whose parents intervene in their parenting, want to raise the grandchildren in addition to having raised their own children. And that, to me, that's just a slap in the face. That's disrespect. You're the grandparent, not the parent. They are raising the children, not you. And you need to respect their decisions in their home, just like they respected your decisions in your home when they were growing up. You demanded it, so now they can demand it. Fear of rejection. I would like my children to keep an open mind so when they're old enough, they're free to choose what they want to do. I do not want my future children to be in the same boat my boyfriend is in. He has been with me for the better part of 5 years now and is really questioning his beliefs. He's afraid to leave his church since that would be like committing social suicide. A lot of his friends and family would leave his life. He knows this, and so do I. I'm going to wrap here. I'm not doing good. Interfaith America, being both, is a rising U.S. trend. So what's happening now is that there's this huge spike in interfaith couples getting married. So we're seeing people that are coming from different religious backgrounds and getting married. And those particular situations are different than in the past. So in the past, you had probably less interfaith marriage, but whenever you did get an interfaith marriage, somebody would convert. So you'd have one party that would say, okay, I'll convert to your religion, or they would withdraw from both religions. In this case, they're actually continuing to practice. So you've got 2 people from 2 different religious backgrounds who may or may not have children, who are then raising those children in a home where there's multiple religious input. I don't know what the implications are going to be of this. And there is some data that's disputed. I'm going to just say this is contested, but there's some data that says that these homes actually have much higher rates of divorce as well. Doesn't really say why. There's nothing, as far as I know, to indicate causation there, to say that it's because of the interreligiousness that there's a problem, or if that's just sort of a corollary of something else. But we've got this increasing approval. In 2008, about 80% of adults ages 18 to 23 approved of interfaith marriage. You didn't see that too much in the past in the US. This was frowned upon if you married somebody outside your faith. And that's the failing fast to part. That's the divorces may be increased as well. But again, I don't know why. It doesn't really go into why. And I'm not going to go and read these slides, just kind of be aware that there's a changing trend that could impact this, what we're seeing here. I think as families become more open to interfaith integration, obviously this type of rejecting somebody of a different faith within your home is going to start to be less acceptable. Whether or not the communities that are doing that will insulate themselves further and it won't impact them, I don't know. But I think it's an interesting trend that sort of may impact what I've been talking about today. I don't know if we have time for questions.
3 minutes. So we have a couple questions.
3 minutes for questions. Do we have a question?
Bring you a microphone.
Thank you. Yeah, here's a question I've had for a long time about this. Before I retired from school teaching, I had a Jehovah's Witness student that was a wonderful writer, and I suggested to her that when the time came for her to make a decision about going to university, she should consider using her writing skills and perhaps pursue a degree in journalism or something like that. I did not know that university is shit in the world of Jehovah's Witnesses. I found out later that the girl was disconnected from the family. Now, what does this do about legal issues, like, for example, when wills or estates are sorted out? Do you know? Have you ever heard of when the...
Well, I mean, I imagine that you could handle it however you want to handle it. Like if a parent, for example, wants to disown her for this, they probably could cut her out of the will. They do keep a requirement to sort of look after the person. You know, they're not allowed to like if the person needs actual help with something that's, you know, could hurt them or something like that, they are compelled to continue to take care of the person. But they are not compelled to maintain any kind of social connection with them.
Yeah, when they're older and the will come up to the will and the estate thing again, and they've been disconnected, you said disowned.
Right.
I would imagine, or I'm sure I didn't make a statement, I'm going to ask you a question, that child still has a legal opportunity to say, hey, I'm blood in this family. I do deserve a piece of the financial action. Is that?
I mean, you could probably challenge the will just like anyone could challenge a will, but I don't know that you'd be any more successful because of a religious objection. Are we done? Are we? A couple more questions? Okay.
It's more of a contribution than a question. I was doing research on some things like this because I think this is an important inquiry. There's an organization in England called Stand Alone. They're working with university in England, and they're doing investigation into people who are estranged from family. It's definitely worth a look for anybody who's interested in these issues. One of the notes that they make is that in a lot of therapy models, the first thing the therapists recommend is reconciliation. And so they're investigating and dealing with the notion that sometimes reconciliation is not an appropriate or useful tactic.
Right.
So it's really interesting work if you look into that.
Thank you. Okay, they're telling me that's the end. All right, thank you.
Make sure we thank you formally.
Okay, and I guess they need to unconnect me.